A very good evening to you, and you're very welcome along to another edition of the Green Zone Conversations with Eugene Doyle. Now, as the chattering classes in Ireland continue to spout anti-Semitism at every hand's turn, but of course say they don't, Marco Alexander, live from Jerusalem, and myself will explore what the politicians really think, but either can't say, are intimidated, or afraid of being cancelled. To get into the nitty-gritty of this matter, who better to shine a light into the reason for a perceived anti-Semitic unity in the Oireachtas than former Fianna Fáil Senator Ned O'Sullivan. We will also discuss whether Ireland's claim that they are critical of Israel stands up to scrutiny, or it is simply a guise for anti-Semitism, aided and abetted by a biased media. Ned O'Sullivan was born in 1950, is an Irish Fianna Fáil politician who served as a senator for the Labour panel since July 2007 until 2024. He was a member of Listowel Town Council from 1985 to 2007 and Kerry County Council from 1991 to 2007. He was educated at UCD and St Patrick's College of Education, Drumcondra, where he worked as a teacher at primary and secondary level in Dublin, Offaly and Kerry before taking over his family's menswear business in Listowel. He was a cousin of Kit Ahern, who served as a TD and senator. Ned O'Sullivan, you're very, very welcome to the Green Zone Conversations with Eugene Doyle.
Thank you, Eugene. Good to link up with you.
And you too. And Marco, you are, as my co-host, you're very welcome as well, live from Jerusalem. Thank you indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you.
Now, just get a bit of housekeeping out of the way first. Anyone listening into the program, I'd like you to really just send your comment, put a comment in the comment box. We'll get to your comments and we'll answer them if we can. I'd also like you to subscribe to the channel, please, if you would. Just hit that subscribe button below. And you can also like and share. And also just remember that the link that you came in to the YouTube is also the link of the replay. So it's just the replay. If someone missed it and you want to get it to someone to share it afterwards, just click on the same link again, and that is the replay of it. Now, okay, let's look. First of all, Ned, let's just deal since you retired. How you finished in 2024? How is retirement going for you?
Absolutely wonderful. I decided not to contest any more elections. I fought 13 elections in my time. I won 11 of them, and I won 4 Senate elections in succession. So at 74, I think I've had enough, and I am interested in writing, and I have a very big family, loads of grandchildren. I've lots to do, Eugene, and this is my first probably dip back into the political zone in the widest sense since I retired.
And Ned, what was your life like? What was your life like as a senator? What was your life? How did you like the years in the Senate?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much, Eugene. I came into politics, as you referred to, Kit Ahern, who was a cousin. We called her my aunt. She was a TD and a senator for many years. Very educated woman, great woman for the arts and the Irish language. And I suppose I became part of her canvass team, and ultimately I aspired then to being elected myself. I started at local level in the town council. I went on to Kerry County Council, became mayor of Kerry in 2004. Ran unsuccessfully in 2 Dáil elections as a sweeper. Did a good, respectable vote on both occasions, but as happens in politics, I didn't get any breaks when it came to looking for the Senate afterwards, and I had to fight that and win it on my own ground, which I'm glad to say I did. So I've actually 40 years full-time as a public representative when I packed it up on the 1st of February this year, Eugene. But it was a wonderful experience and a privilege. And you might wonder how a fellow from a small town in rural Ireland that came to associate himself with Israel's struggle. I hope I'm not moving on too fast there.
No, go on. Go ahead.
I was in my early 20s, had taught in Dublin for a while and came back home to Kerry, and a very enterprising local committee had built or constructed what is known as the Garden of Europe. There was some waste ground attached to our town park, and a great man called Paddy Fitzgibbon, a solicitor and a wonderful man for nature, he decided, let's have a tree or a shrub for all the countries of Europe, and we call it the Garden of Europe, and it's thriving. It's a huge tourist attraction. And when we finished it, or when they finished it, he said, let's have a central idea here now. And he went for the idea of the Holocaust. I don't know what inspired him on that, but he and his group commissioned a Holocaust memorial. We must be one of the very few towns in rural Ireland where there is a Holocaust memorial, and that's been there now since the early mid-80s. And it's accompanied by a bust of Schiller, the great German poet and writer, as if you like, a kind of a contrast. And Mervyn Taylor, who was a man of the Jewish persuasion and was a minister at the time in the Labour, he came down to open it with a wonderful celebration. And the whole town was delighted with it, and we were very proud of ourselves. And the Holocaust Memorial is still visited on a very regular basis. I think that was my first interest in it. And of course, I knew the story of the Holocaust from my studies and the horror of it. And when I went abroad, I always found it interesting to visit. Like in Berlin, I was in the Holocaust Museum there, and in many other countries. Most recently, where's that I was? I think it was at I came across a lovely little synagogue there with a great history of the Jewish diaspora in Spain. And the interest was there from day one. So I put it into any sort of practice until I came to be elected at national level in the Senate. And I had opportunity there to explore and to consider what groups and committees I might join. And I was very, very interested in getting involved with our Jewish parliamentary friends from Israel. And I became part of what was to a certain extent a stillborn development, the Irish-Israeli Parliamentary Friendship Group.
Okay. And Ned, if I can just bring you back to the 80s when that Holocaust Memorial was being erected, and what was the relationship between Ireland and Israel back then, if you can remember, if you can, even if you in short, like?
Well, my memory would have been very positive. I always was aware that in Fianna Fáil there was a kind of a ginger group was always bringing the plight of Palestine to the fore at party conferences and literature, but it was a small group, and I have to say they were responsible people and very sincere in what they did, and they were in no way confrontational about it. I was aware of that. And my view of Israel growing up, and I think it was the view that would have been common to my equals, was that the Israelis were fantastic people to create a country out of nothing in the midst of, extremism and fanaticism. They got on with the business of building their state. They excelled in everything they put their hands to. I think the Jewish people are very, very clever. I love music, and how many great of our composers were of the Jewish persuasion. I read quite a lot, translations, obviously. I don't have the languages. But, and I remember when I was in college, it was the done thing, the hippie thing, to go out to Israel and for my friends to get involved in the kibbutz program, which was kind of, if you like, very trendy at the time. And I don't know where all that kind of feel-good factor that I would have experienced between, we'll say, 1950 and 19, shall we say, 8, where that started to erode. In a group that were pro-Palestine, I don't think they were anti-Israel, and they weren't, they weren't with endeavour. And I don't know. The first time I became aware that there was something going on that I didn't agree with was when I noticed Palestinian flags beginning to appear down here at Sinn Féin rallies. We have a lot of Sinn Féin in my area here. They have a TD. And when my aunt was running for her last election, it was during the H Block campaign, and I have to say she was very badly treated. Her constituency clinics were boycotted, and she was jeered when she went on platforms. And I used to see these Palestinian flags, and I couldn't kind of equate that. I suppose that sounds a bit naive, but that's when I began to realise there was something in all that I didn't like.
Marco, do you want to just follow in on anything that Ned has said there?
I'm following it with great interest because we're sort of getting the genesis of the way Palestinism took root in Ireland over the years. It came to a great extent out of nothing, in the sense that there is no affinity with between the Irish struggle and this struggle and this cause which was invented in the 60s. So I'm very interested to explore, and I see some very interesting elements here where he speaks about Sinn Féin, who poisoning the environment. And I've been doing a little bit of research, and I think it's important to bear in mind that Sinn Féin and the IRA developed a relationship with the PLO during the course of these years. So I think this is something that we need to delve into. And unfortunately, the mainstream Irish parties have tended to be drawn into this maelstrom of Palestinism. To a great extent, Sinn Féin / IRA set a certain agenda, and it developed a lot of momentum in academia and in the media. And I feel a lot of well-meaning people have been drawn into this on a wave of it's almost a sort of Palestinist joyriding on one hand, and tapping into an emotive sense without really engaging it with arguments. So we have this false assumption that there is an equation between the Irish struggle and the Palestinian struggle, which doesn't hold any water. The Irish are an ancient people, as the Jewish people are an ancient people, and the so-called Palestinian people are something that were concocted in the 60s. But to their credit, they've been very successful. They've been very successful, and many people, I believe well-meaning people in Ireland, perhaps Ned will be able to tell us a little bit more about this. I feel they've been bullied into assuming certain positions. Ned, perhaps you can shed some light on that.
Say that most people here in Ireland do not buy into this thing that we have something in common with the Palestinian struggle. Our history is a totally different story to theirs. They can tell their own story, but most people don't buy into that fallacy at all. And it should be remembered as well, that in my own party, we had several people of the Jewish persuasion acting.
Indeed.
For level, the family, and you had the Goldbergs in Cork, and there was so in the world of old literature and all. It was. I won't go back on that again, but yes, this thing, and of course you have to remember that Sinn Féin IRA have form here, because wherever there is terrorism, and wherever there was terrorism, whether it was FARC in Colombia or any other place, that's where they found friends. And I suppose if you're a terrorist and you're prepared to take life for what you believe is the ideal political outcome in your country, then you will relate to people who have similarly crazy notions in other countries as well. But it definitely hit out far beyond that. As you have said, the Palestinian campaign has been relentless inside and outside of Parliament. It has been non-stop. I saw it myself in the Senate. I mean, there was hardly a day went by in my 18 years in the Senate when the question of Palestine wasn't raised under some guise or other. Many of the times it was quite spurious. It could be on the order of business. There might be lots to talk about, issues at home and abroad, of course, but always Palestine was to the fore, like certain, I suppose, senators made it almost a career. There's no point in not naming people. Senator Francis Black was non-stop and still is in promoting the cause of Palestine. She's entitled to make that her point of view, and I respect that, even though I was very disappointed listening to her on a radio interview when she could not answer straight whether the Israeli state had a right to exist. Now, I mean, that to me, for a person who's in the democratic system, was very alarming and very disappointing. But then when we, if you like, people who weren't buying into this narrative, made our small attempts to balance the equation by inviting in a wonderful man called Joseph Haddad. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And he came into us and he addressed, we invited, or I didn't invite, the people who were involved did, all parties to come and listen to him and ask him questions. And would you believe there was quite a dissent from the extreme left and from the people we've mentioned to have him allowed into Leinster House, into our parliament at all. Whereas
Indeed.
hogging it morning, noon, and night. But they realised that it was a bad call, so he did come in and address an awful lot of Oireachtas members, and I was very pleased to see a good cross section there. And I felt when that session, questions and answer session, was over, people were, I could literally hear their brains cogs moving and thinking, beginning to come on my side of the equation. And that's around that time then we tried to set up the Irish Israel Friendship Group. We were very fortunate that we had a very good person involved in the Fine Gael party. She is now Minister for Health, Jennifer Carroll McNeil. And Jennifer was brave enough to say she would head up the chair of it. Unfortunately for us and for all of us, she was promoted to cabinet or state ministry almost immediately afterwards, and that debarred her from continuing. It's only for backbenchers, if you follow me there, Matt. So we tried to persevere with it for a while. We did meet some members of the Knesset, and we were preparing a number of us to reciprocate the visit when things began to get out of hand.
I want to just explore the nonsensical equating of our struggle here with the struggle in Israel. I mean, Marco, going back to a previous webinar, would you, at the end of the British mandate, there was a lot of support for Israel in Ireland back then, against the British, that they had taken over land. To go from that to Sinn Féin IRA, which is where it really ballooned, this whole Palestinism, but you call it Palestinism, and I want that repeated on the webinar, because you're very clear about that. Instead of saying Palestinian, you're very clear about Palestinians.
Indeed. And let me reaffirm something which I've said in previous podcasts, that Palestinianism is something to the detriment of decent Arab people as well. Their minds have been poisoned with this ideology. And let me address a point which you made before about Ireland during the period of the War of Independence, and indeed the great analogies that there are between the Irish struggle and the Jewish struggle. Bear in mind that there wasn't even a Palestinian cause in 1948. There is no mention of a Palestinian people in the United Nations partition plan. So nobody was even fighting for a Palestinian state, for a Palestinian people, because those notions didn't exist. The war was about eliminating the Jewish presence in this part of the world. It was a genocidal war. People should be very clear about it. And I've mentioned it before that Israel, the Jewish side, accepted the partition plan in 1947. And in that partition plan, 45% of pre-1967 Israel, so we're not talking about post-1967, we're talking about pre-1967 Israel, was assigned to the Arab side. So that people need to be very clear about that. So there is no Palestinian cause at this stage. There never was. As I mentioned before, it is Palestinism, okay? And it's something that has poisoned not only people, decent people around the world, it's oppressed many decent Arabs here in this part of the world. And there's a growing awareness among them of what it has done to them, how it has destroyed the fabric of their societies, which is different from societies in Europe, okay? But it has caused enormous damage. It has poisoned generations of young people and turned them, unfortunately, into terrorists, much as the Nazi Party did in the 1930s in Germany.
Ned?
Yeah, I'm interested in that. I did study history at third level, and I would have been reasonably aware of all that legend, if you like, of the Nakba, which I've studied and which is totally different to what is presented to us on a daily basis nowadays. And I understand the Balfour Agreement and all of that. It was a UN initiative, and the Jewish people were entitled to their home. They had enough, God knows, and. It seems to me that the other Arab states, they may not love Israel, but they're fairly well prepared to live with them. And in fact, they'd say if they were left to their own devices, they'd probably find it easier to get on with Israel than they would with Palestine and Hamas, especially, and Hezbollah and all that. You don't see any of those Arab states opening gates and inviting these people to come and live with them. Like where our history is pretty clear cut. I don't believe in dwelling in the past. I'm very much on the side of my party leader, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, that if Irish unity will come, it will come in a natural, organic way. And I think we have to learn how to share the island first and live together as neighbours. And we haven't really succeeded in doing that even since the Good Friday Agreement. But like, it's live and let live is my view. And whereas I'm a nationalist at heart and would have been a Republican all my life, but the word has become tainted now by Sinn Féin IRA. I don't believe we live in the past. Unfortunately, the past seems to be used in Gaza and in the struggle over there. The past and death and darkness and negativity, to me, never wins anything for you. And where I cannot condone, shall we say, the debt levels in Gaza, and I'm not a spokesman for the IDF, no more than I would be for any army, but I'm aware that there's a war going on, and whenever you have a war, unfortunately, as it may be, you will get civilian casualties. But who's trying to stop the war? Who wants to stop the war, or who wants to keep it going? In my view, that's the real question. It's Hamas will never be satisfied. Left.
Yeah.
And I want to come back. I want to come back to that, Ned. I want to come back to that, Jordan. I just want to clear up a couple of things about home first of all, just for the moment. Just in relation to the Sinn Féin IRA's hijacking of the Palestinians issue. Do you think that left, if not far left politicians, but left anyway politicians, independents and everything, have hijacked the Palestine thing for their own political careers, to launch political careers?
No, there's no question in my mind about that, Eugene. Now, it'll be very hard to hijack something from Sinn Féin because they are expert hijackers themselves. But yeah, they have been slightly outmaneuvered by, we said, people before profit and some of the other extreme left people there, who definitely, they seem to have terrible amount of time on their hands, considering some of them are public representatives, and I know that public representative in Ireland, in any country, is a full-time job. But these people seem to regard it as a part-time job. Their full-time job is agitating on Gaza, and they some of them are making ground politically on it. And of course, when something becomes the flavour of the month, and politics is not an exact science, and we all know that politicians like to back winners rather than losers, myself included. And when you see a situation where young people in particular, and young women in particular, are out with their bullhorns and their flags and all the rest of it, there's a tendency for politicians, if not to jump on the bandwagon, to make sure they're not steamrolled by that bandwagon. And I think that leads us on to why there is such a silence, in my view, from mainstream central politicians on the whole issue.
Very interesting. May I just chip in there? I believe there's a lot of joyriding on the Palestinian issue as well, which politicians are taking advantage of. And they're riding this tiger of Palestinianism, which I think is to the detriment of the Irish people. And it's very irresponsible. You mentioned the word hijack, which is a very interesting word, because Palestinism basically introduced the hijacking industry in the 70s and 80s. Before that, you could basically walk on an aeroplane. I'm sure, Ned, you'll remember that. You didn't have to go through all those checks. So that is basically one of the great gifts which Palestinism has brought to the world, rendering international travel a misery for millions of people. There's also another element which I'd like to mention to do with aeroplanes as well, and I think it is a metaphor for what has happened to Ireland. I want to draw people's attention to the Hindawi affair. The Hindawi affair was a case of happened in the mid-80s where a Palestinist terrorist impregnated an Irish lady called Anne-Marie Murphy. Okay, and I'm not sure, perhaps you remember this instance. He impregnated an Irish lady and they were supposed to get married, and he suggested that she go on ahead to Israel ahead of him, and that he would join her later. Okay, and what he did was he said he asked her to carry a bag with a bomb onto an El Al aeroplane. Of course, it was discovered, fortunately, by the Israeli security services, and this terrorist was caught trying to escape to Syria. But this is a metaphor of the struggle. Just think of the degeneracy of a person who gets a woman pregnant, and obviously she must have been in love with him as well. This is sort of indicative of the relationship that Ireland has been fooled into engaging with. And I think it gives us an idea of what Palestinism is. Bear in mind, I'll repeat it again. This man got an Irish lady called Anne-Marie Murphy pregnant, gave her a bag with a bomb, where she would have obviously been killed with the rest of the passengers. And so I think this really enables us to look into the belly of the beast of Palestinism, to understand what it's really all about.
I think I agree with you, Marco, and we need to go beyond October the 7th for confirmation of what you're saying. I mean, I got access to some video records of what took place. I don't think I can imagine anybody really that could find themselves as being a human being that would take part in it, that would enjoy it, that would cheer it on from the sides, like many did who didn't actually do the shooting themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
States of distress to be shown on lorries, wounded and raped, and children abused. And every now and again, when people in Irish politics are making a case for Palestine, they will mention October. They will mention it. It's almost as if it's something they need to do so that they can carry on with what they really want to say.
Indeed.
Exactly.
October the 7th. And as recently as this week alone, our president, Dr. Michael D. Higgins, who has a penchant for speaking out on issues which are not in his brief, but he this week alone, when he's opening our great cultural event, Flackyol the Hearn, could not resist having another say in the dying days of his presidency about what's going on in Gaza. And again, he did mention the video of that unfortunate man that we saw holed up in a cave, the hostage. It before he went on with his business of attacking Israel. So, like, it is almost it's accepted that this happened, but it's part. It's in the argument. It's no longer narrative.
And Ned, I want to get into that shortly because that's very, very important, and I have some images I want to display a little later on. But just Ned, just in relation to you being a kind of in some ways a lone wolf in the Seanad not saying you weren't the only one, but certainly in a minority. Did you suffer in any way as a result of your views on Israel?
I suppose I did. Yeah, I'm thick-skinned enough. Every year that you're in politics, another layer of skin grows on the back of your neck. And, but very little upsets me anymore.
Hmm.
But I like to be out of kilter in my own party. I'm a very loyal party man. I was born into it. I believe in it. I believe in our leader. And I would like to be, if you like, right bang smack in the middle of whatever the thinking is in my party. But I have a record for not necessarily always working at that, because I was one of the very few in my own party that took a stance on the repeal of the Eighth Amendment. I was in favour of it, and I voted for it at the committee. And 90%, 70, 85% of our parliamentary party were very much against repealing it at the time. The referendum showed that I had my ear to the ground, and I knew what people were thinking, women especially. So I can be independent enough, but I don't like to be out of my comfort zone no more than any politician. Perhaps if I was a Dr. Dála, a TD, I mightn't have had the freedom to be so brave, if you like, because a TD is answerable every day on the ground to people in his constituency. I don't know if Mark will realise that the Senate in Ireland is kind of once removed. It's not a parliamentary democracy elected by a local constituency of people. It's too complicated to go into. You have more freedom there. But at the same time, I know there are people who shared my view and privately over a coffee or a chat said, you're a tough man to go on like you are, but see, you're making a share of sense, all right. But look, there's no percentage in going down there. This is where people are thinking, and I'm not going to condemn any of my colleagues or even people, centre politicians of the other parties. It's perhaps my position allowed me to be more independent minded and to be more outspoken, but I did suffer some of the look, I don't bother with that whole Twitter thing or X anymore, but some of the vilest stuff I've seen in my life was put up on that. And family, friends and relations, especially the younger generations of my family, think I'm for the birds. They think they don't see it my way at all. They're all offering me different books to read, and I've read extensively. I've read Robert Fisk, I've read them all, but I come to my own conclusions, and I think an intelligent reading of the history of the region, you don't need to be a historian. If you're intelligent and open-minded, you cannot really buy into all this flag waving for Hezbollah and Hamas that's going on.
Absolutely. Now, Ned, just in relation to the coverage, especially since October the 7th, I mean, the coverage in Ireland, in my opinion, has been nothing short of disgraceful. The way it's been covered by both politicians and indeed the media, the mainstream media, RTE and the likes have covered this, in my opinion, disgracefully. Because you mentioned a comment earlier on that the hostages came as a mention of the hostages is always just thrown in there as we have to say this, so, and then get on with the rant then about Israel and what they're doing to the poor Gazan people. Like,
Absolutely. The other factor that I should mention, Eugene, because of my support for Israel, I suppose, and because I became familiar with the embassy and a wonderful woman, Ambassador Dana, that I have great time for and great respect for what she was subjected to. And I've attended a number of functions in Rathmines, and I've subscribed like that. I put my money where my mouth is, really. And what the point I'm making is, I met a load of people because of that. A lot of my elderly people, they are absolutely scared out of their wits. These are respectable Irish citizens, 3 and 4 generations Irish and more, whose antecedents came from Eastern Europe and made a living in Ireland and made a good living, and they're all working hard in the professions and in business and trade and all the rest. These people are very, very afraid. You wouldn't walk through O'Connell Street these mornings with ostensibly wearing any symbols of being pro-Israel. You can walk down the street with Hezbollah flags or any of the other ISIS or any of the rest. I've seen them all. I was staying in Buswell's Hotel. I had a ringside view outside Parliament at all their demonstrations. Every day there was a new flag of horror coming along. And it struck me that the people on the left, actually, who you expect left-wing people to be socially conscious. That's what they say they are, and that's their profession. And okay, that's fair enough if they live up to that. But how can they countenance being associated with the horrors of October the 7th? They're very good to point out the pictures that appear in the media every night, on television news. I mean, RTE have stopped even qualifying the information that they give out now. In the early months, they would say figures supplied by the what was it again? The
Hamas Ministry of Health or whatever.
It was Hamas. Then they
Hamas
dropped.
Ministry of Health, yeah.
No, they don't even give it any attribution at all. They quote it as fact. I personally have to say, and I got into about it, I condemn totally every loss of human life, civilian life, but I don't believe half of what I'm seeing on RTE screens at night.
Absolutely. When you take it that the main television channel in Ireland, RTE, they were one of the instigators to try and block Israel from being in the Eurovision this year. They were the ones who went to the broadcast union, the European Broadcast Union, to try and prevent the Israel entry to the Eurovision, which just shows where RTE are on this.
And it's just one example, I think, of how the whole Gaza thing is starting to corrupt political life. I say around Europe, around the world, and in Ireland. It has leaked over into sport. It has come into, as you say, the Eurovision. I live only 50 miles from Shannon Airport. It's an absolutely essential hub, huge part of the economy of the Mideast. And you have these people attacking planes and stopping customers getting in and out, people traveling, upsetting their flight times and all the rest of it. It's everywhere. I'm involved in a very interesting artistic thing in the Seoul called Writers' Week, and the chairman of it. And we had some great lectures and we allowed every opinion to have their say and their time. But it was noted that in one particular case, it was Owen Harris, who's a friend of mine and a man I admire, and he was talking in general, like talking actually about Daniel O'Connell, the great Irish curryman that we're celebrating his 250th anniversary. A great friend of the Jews and a great
Indeed.
friend.
The great liberator.
Slavery, he was always right 250 years ago.
That's right.
And when Owen was finishing his speech, two young ladies got up and they objected that he didn't talk about Gaza.
Indeed.
It has to be part of literally everything you do, morning, noon, and night.
Indeed. Ned, because obviously this thing doesn't happen in a void. This all-pervasive Palestinism doesn't happen in a void. I think we have to try and understand who are the malignant actors that are poisoning Irish society. I think we have to try and understand that. And do you have any opinions on that?
I do, but they're kind of mixed opinions, Marco. I do believe that there's a great deal of insincerity in the support for Gaza in certain left-wing Sinn Féin politics. I think there's no doubt that it is being used. It is being used. These parties will use anything and everything they can to get support from the people. And one day something will come along that it will be no longer political or politic for them to support Palestine, and they will be very quick to disappear and find a new banner to rally around. So there is that. Then you come to the ordinary people in the street. There was an opinion poll in the Sunday paper the other day. What are the issues that affect you? And they went from the very top, say housing is a big problem in Ireland, and for about 40%, maybe 35% of the people that were polled said that's the main issue. Next, people said the cost of living. then it was the health, maybe down around 12%, and all the way down, and down towards the bottom, around maybe 5 or 6%. I forget the number. It might be bigger now. It goes up and down. You say 10% for about Gaza. I mean, would be, in my view, a fair representation of how people see this thing affecting themselves.
Yes, 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 yes. I see.
Mhm.
I see. It's not going to swing an election, but it does make a lot of noise.
No, but isn't it amazing there's an issue which doesn't really impact on people on a daily basis, other than we are, like myself, they're all shocked and horrified
Mm,
by images that appear in front of them, whether they're false or true. But
mm.
that level of engagement is driving 75% of our politicians in the.
Indeed, indeed, yes. Yeah,
And how dangerous is that, Ned? How
Hmm?
dangerous is that? How dangerous is that for Ireland?
I don't like it. I don't like it. There's always been, look, the safe thing in politics is keep you, whatever you say nothing, that kind of thing. And you look, I've been in the political game, and I'm very slow to point the finger of blame, especially decent, honest people that I know in politics, that they're in it to try and help people, help their communities, and all the rest of it. They would probably say, look, there's a flipping head of steam after building up on this issue over the last 12 months. Ironically, since October, it wasn't nearly as bad before October. You
Mm, mm,
would have them off, but it seems to be counteracted and in some devilish way twisted.
mm. Yeah,
And now they're less likely now to come out and say maybe what's really on their minds. But
right.
I know there's a certain generation think I'm for the birds, and maybe I am. Fool like a fool.
No.
But there's wisdom and experience, and people
Mm,
of my group and people that I know of, in around, not all old people, an awful lot of them share my opinion, and
mm,
they're disgusted by what's taking place, and they're horrified by the
mm,
manner in which Ireland seems to be now, if you like, up to recently on their own
mm,
against Israel. Now, obviously,
mm,
the other tracks with France and Canada and all sorts of coming in.
mm.
This is music to the ears of Hamas.
Indeed, indeed, yes, 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 and it's to the detriment of the Irish people as well. I think it's counterproductive. It's not in Ireland's interests because, as I've mentioned before, Palestinism, if one really analyzes it, is it is a front for jihadism. All the forces that attack Western society gather around this flag. And I think in Ireland, as well as elsewhere in Europe, people are beginning to join the dots.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is the situation, and it's not the first time this has happened in history, as the Jewish people know well. Hitler didn't come to power overnight either,
Mm,
and that with very small percentage of the vote. I studied all that, and even when he did get the power, he was still under something like around 30% of the poll. But once he got in, of course, he cancelled all the rules and burnt the Reichstag and all
indeed.
the rest. But
Mm, mm,
so
mm,
it's forget the point I'm trying to make now, but it would seem to me now and again the picture does change a little. This is a very live thing we're talking about,
Mhm.
and at this stage it's the only show in town, if you like, as regards
mm,
the media. We'll get a little talk about Haiti now because an unfortunate Irish missionary is missing. We might now and again focus on starvation in the Sudan
mm,
and Yemen and all these other places. We
mm.
hardly hear a word about the Ukrainians, the misfortunes. Uh,
Indeed,
Yeah,
indeed.
exactly, Ned. Because I wanted to come to that. I asked a question at the beginning of this webinar. When Ireland says that it's been critical of Israel, that it's entitled to be critical of Israel, which it is entitled to be critical of Israel, but there is very clear. It's very clear that it's not criticism of Israel. Do you think that they have overstepped the mark in relation to the government and the the chattering classes have overstepped the mark here in relation to guising a criticism of Israel, but it's really anti-Semitism. I mean that when I say that, Ned, I'm talking about the fact that there's a war on our doorstep in Ukraine. Gets very little mention. Gets very little mention now. It did at the start, but getting very little mention now. As you say, in Haiti, it's only because there's an Irish person missing, and there's various wars going on throughout the world where there's really innocent people dying in their hundreds and thousands, and there isn't anything about it. So, does it stand up to scrutiny that we're being critical of Israel and not being anti-Semitic?
You have to see that there is something wrong. We in Ireland would have been very concerned. One of the earliest, I suppose, visual images we got of starvation was from Ethiopia there some 35, 40 years ago now, I suppose, with the early days of television almost. And we saw those poor young children dying, and the Irish people were absolutely horrified, and they empathized with them, and they collected money for them. And that's how they responded. They responded generously and in a positive way. They didn't necessarily take a political side against whoever was imposing all this. It's the same in other European and world struggles. We didn't necessarily decide this crowd are wrong and this crowd are right. We looked to help in any way we could with concern and trochera and all those things. It seems to me to be different when it involves Jewish people. Now, the people on the left go absolutely berserk when you suggest there may be anti-Semitism at the root of their activity. They really hate being that put to them, and I'm slow to put it to them because it's a horrible, it's a subhuman reaction if it's there, and it is totally unreasonable. But you know,
should we not say it, Ned? If that's what it is, should we not just say it?
Well, Forrest Gump, that movie, he came up with a famous statement about foolish is as foolish does, and I say that anti-Semitism is as anti-Semitism does, and if you are behaving in a way that's particularly antagonistic to a section, be it a religious group, a group because of their color, a group of because of their success, whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't have any rationale, then there's something more sinister at the depth of it. Now I know Dr. on the hair and Michael D. Higgins went absolutely apoplectic when it was that he was being anti-Semitic. But my answer to that was that he certainly wasn't going out of his way to make sure that he wasn't being interpreted as anti-Semitic. People have to be careful. Words count, actions count. You know, marching counts. All these things count. And if you're invariably finding it comfortable for you to be protesting or agitating against the Jewish nation, as opposed to other people who are in similar conflicts, then you have to ask yourself questions.
The question certainly does arise. Now, as you know, I grew up in Ireland. Eugene and I went to school together, and what is happening now bears little relationship with my personal experience in Ireland. People were generally very friendly. They knew who I was. They knew who my grandparents were. People were very kind, and relationships were very good. And the Jewish community, I think, was the most integrated community of immigrants, because essentially speaking, we were all immigrants a few generations back, and they weaved their way successfully into the fabric of Irish culture. And I want to raise this question because whereas the Jews weave themselves into the fabric of Irish culture and became Irish and participated in the institutions, there are other immigrants which aren't quite doing the same thing. And we see a lot of wear and tear in the fabric of Irish society. And there are certain immigrant groups who are taking over public spaces. And you know to whom I am alluding, of course. And I believe they are also, to a great extent, responsible for stirring up anti-Jewish sentiment. That seems to me to be the case, not just in Ireland, but also throughout Europe, where we have growing Islamist communities. I'm not talking about decent Muslims, but there's certainly a great mass of people that are tinged with Islamist philosophy, or whatever you want to call it, jihadist ideology, who want to extend their influence. And ultimately, and they don't hide this, they don't mince their words, they want to take over Western democracies. And the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish struggle is part of this. I see it as the beachhead to something much more sinister, which is placing a lot of a strain on European and, let's be frank, Christian societies.
Yeah, I see.
And before,
I listen.
Ned, just before you answer that, Ned, just answer that, because I'm noticing now, even in mainstream media papers in the UK, the UK are highlighting the fact that a minority of immigrants of that culture are now becoming a danger to the fabric of English society. And they're worried about that. When you see that appearing in a mainstream media paper, then it's time to start waking up and looking. But what do you think of what Marco was saying? Has the immigration of certain cultures exacerbated the pro-Palestinian situation here in Ireland?
Well, I suppose, to answer it in a roundabout way, the Jewish citizens of Ireland are probably the most law-abiding citizens we have. I've never heard of the Jewish people, either individually or as a group, being involved in criminality, troublemaking, agitation, trying to destabilize our society, trying to destabilize our government. As you said, they have merged seamlessly into mainstream Irish society. There may be some jealousy of them because they're highly successful. They're highly successful in the financial world, and other things like that. Maybe some kind of people have a grudge about that. But if you're watching one group solely, if all your focus and all your animosity and all your sort of angst is aimed at one group, then of course it's ideal for groups like ISIS, because up to now, I think they're being outed a bit at this stage, but up to now they have been kind of under the radar. I was listening to a very good podcast a couple of weeks ago with Douglas Murray. I'm sure you know Douglas Murray's work.
Indeed.
He's a man I can listen to, and I've yet to find fault with what he's saying. And he does think that, to a certain extent, the rest of the world are standing back and letting Israel do a lot of heavy lifting for them. I mean, Israel is a democracy in the true sense of the word, and people trying to find fault with it. There's no perfect democracy anywhere, including Ireland or the United States. But Israel is the only democracy, as far as I can see, in the entire Middle East. They're the only country where women are treated as equal citizens and respected. You know, and this idea of there being apartheid there and all these other fancy words that are being bandied about now, they're being made meaningless. Words are being made meaningless now.
Absolutely.
Marco, tell us about how the Arab members of society in Israel are treated. So just because we always get this get this narrative over here. Tell us in reality how they are.
Right. So if one comes here, one can see with their own eyes. Arabs are represented in all walks of society, in the hospitals as doctors, in the courts as judges, in the parliament as politicians, in the professions. In no country in the Middle East do Arabs have the same possibilities as they do in Israel. Israel is the country which gives more rights to all of its citizens, irrespective of religion, than any of the countries that surround us. Basically, the same rights as people have in Western liberal democracies.
And Ned, can I just ask you, just in relation to in relation to the recognition of Palestinian state by Ireland, Norway, Spain, UK, about to, or whatever, and is this a reward to terrorism, in your opinion?
It's certainly not a deterrent. And one thing about it, I'm ambivalent enough about whether Ireland should be recognising Palestine or not. If I had to go strictly on logic and rationale, I would say no. But there are bigger issues at stake now. And if even it brought peace closer, I could live with it. What I think is even more madness, though, in Ireland, and to a certain extent in my early days in the Senate, I was guilty because I didn't stand up against this whole movement against the Occupied Territories Bill, which has been, pushed all by the same group of people. You can see that the major parties are reluctant. They're not happy about it, but gradually, by inch, row by row, they have allowed themselves to be pushed further and further along. They want to. It's the fact that it hasn't become law yet encourages me. And it is a good way to go in the new session before it will come to pass. So, but I mean, to me, that is our own business community have made it quite clear they're worried about this. It's fine to be grandstanding. It's fine to be taking humanitarian stands. Everybody wants to be more humanitarian than the next. I think Bono referred to competitive empathy. I don't know if you've heard that phrase or not.
I wasn't aware of that. I was aware of Bono's statements, which didn't really strike me for any qualitative intellectual input. But anyway, be that as it may, we have a question here, Eugene, from Gustavo Olstein.
There. Putting aside the war in the Middle East, what do the people in Ireland, in the streets of Ireland, think about the increasing Muslim population in their country? Ned, what do you think the normal people think about this?
The wrong man to ask that question. I live in a society which is, I suppose, not terribly affected one way or the other. I'm sure they're watching with unease some of the things that are happening in the media. And I suppose, look, ever since 9/11, I think people woke up and realized that there was something trying to undermine the very fabric of Western society. I mean, that was another Holocaust in a smaller way. And yet again, why are we not inclined to be more aware of the dangers here? These people are professed. They want to change society all over the world. They want us all to be like them. And if we don't, they'll kill us. So, whereas I say it doesn't affect me at local level here, I'm 6 months out of politics. I suppose I have disengaged from issues really. But I imagine if I was living in Dublin and watching what was going on in the streets, I don't support any of this extreme right-wing carry-on, but ordinary people are beginning to become more concerned.
Now, and it must be said, I wouldn't put the video up just because I wouldn't want to say and just to sing, but I can just quote from it. In early July, there was a march from Parnell Square to the GPO by the Muslim Muslim groups from a section of that population, and the imam went on the steps of just at the GPO and said, "This is our country, this is our land. We love here more than the Irish love anywhere. We love here." Now, to me, looking at that, that would worry me. Not that Muslims are not welcome here, because as Marco said, there is very decent Muslims out there. But it would worry me that section of the Muslim population would come out with statements like that. And as you say, Ned, we don't seem to be looking at what possible dangers could happen in the future should this immigration of this culture continue and continue.
As you said yourself, we need to be careful that we cannot tar everybody with one brush. But clearly, when we saw the division that took place in the mosque there some time ago, which there was obviously some group within the group which was beginning to undermine, shall we say, the people who had been living here for quite a while and getting on grand, as far as I could see. It would seem that they're being pushed by maybe hotter heads, and that's proof of the pudding that there is disquiet in that community, which we don't want to see it spreading over into general society. But the evidence is that there is more of it happening. I don't know if it's such a huge problem. As I say, it's not something that's on my radar right now. I think what's going on using anti-Israel as a kind of a proxy for undermining everything good in the state, that worries me a lot more.
Okay. And we want to thank Gustavo Alstein for that comment. And if you want to, if you feel like a follow-up comment, we hope we've answered that question for you there. And thank you indeed for taking the time to give us a comment. Now, Ned, just in relation to the politicians, you and I know that you're not the only one when you were in a thing that would be pro-Israel or pro on the side of Israel. But so many of them, and I asked that question at the very start of this, are people afraid to speak out? Are they afraid they're going to be cancelled, or are they intimidated in order not to show their true feelings?
It's a mixture of all that, I think. I don't think it's a lack of courage. I think it's a lack of prioritizing. Some people, as I talked about, competitive empathy there, each group trying to be more shocked and horrified than the next. The reason I referred to Bono is because whatever he said wasn't good enough for the extremists, and they started blackballing him, and they started blackballing Bob Geldof and others who weren't seemingly extreme enough pro-Gaza. So there was that going on, So if there is a false majority feeling out there, and I think it is false. I don't think it would bear too much investigation. Politicians have enough to do, I suppose, in their everyday lives. They're the busiest people in the world. People always downgrade politicians. There's no one in Irish society working as hard as your every ordinary TD. And his main focus is to look after his constituency and get himself re-elected. And things like Gaza and issues of that, unless they're absolutely shoved right into his face, he will not want to get involved in them. You will see occasionally where something happens at local level that the local TD will be impelled to take a stand of some sort, and he or she would much prefer not to be dragged into it,
Now, Ned, just turning to the media, in relation to the obviously there's a lot of innocent people in Gaza being killed, and you rightly say that in the times of war, civilians will be killed in war. But it is quite clear, even though it's not mentioned in Irish media, it is quite clear that Hamas is using people as human shields, and have been since the beginning of the war, using their own people as human shields, making it much more difficult for Israeli Defense Forces to complete the mission. But having said that, I have never heard of an army before in my lifetime, in any army, in any war, where an army sends text messages, flyers, phone calls to tell people, the people living in those areas, that you need to evacuate from this area for a period of time, because we are conducting operations there. I have never heard of an army, any army in the world, ever do that. And I was in the army myself. Never heard that. So we're never hearing any of that on this side in relation to the war in Gaza, where there is a lot of people dying. As you rightly said, there's a lot of people dying. But are a lot of these people dying because they're being used as human shields and we're not reporting it here?
First of all, I suppose it should be remembered that a lot of the people who are dying are members of Hamas. I'd say there's quite a large percentage of the mortality would be from people who were actively in Hamas or Hezbollah or groups like that. And I don't know if anyone is going to lose any sleep about those guys. I mean, was there any warnings given in 9/11? Was there any warnings given on October the 7th? You know, it is very unusual for an army. You know, I noticed that people are saying the IDF are the most model army in the world. That might be an exaggeration, but from my own objective study of it, no army, no soldier is trained not to kill, and that is their job. But I do think that between exaggeration by media, conflation of figures, images coming of child deaths, which are obviously of very, very doubtful provenance. They may have come from another war in another place. We don't know. We only have to trust to the Hamas medical agencies, you know, and I don't really place much trust in them. So, can you say the Israeli army is more or less humane than others? It's a very kind of, I suppose, the question that is for a fireside parlour rather than in the middle of a war where human life is being lost at such a stake. But I mean, you take the bombing of Dresden, you take any of the great events of World War I and World War II. Human life was certainly not the priority of the commanders of the British forces, the American forces, the German forces, the French forces. You know, I know nothing about soldiering, but it's not a pretty game, and a war is on. Maybe it was always going on, but it certainly was restarted by October, and the people who perpetrated it and started it are the ones that I want to give least solace and comfort to in my statements and anything I do.
Marco, have you anything to add to that?
No, I think Ned has dealt with that very, very well. He said everything that needs to be said about that. What I would add is that we spoke about human shields. I believe we also need to speak about media shields, which the Western media are providing for terrorist organizations with their very selective reporting and presenting a very distorted picture. Their focus on something which is not a genocide, which is a war, because we have to use words correctly, and they're willfully ignoring a real episodes of ethnic cleansing, slaughter, and rape in southern Syria now. I wonder what is the level of reporting as to what's going on in southern Syria with the massacres of the Druze and the Christians in Syria.
Zero.
Where is the outrage? Where is the outrage? And there are some terrible atrocities which have been perpetrated against these communities. The Christian community has undergone a real genocide in these countries, and yet everybody is silent.
I couldn't agree more. And even when the Christian groups were being attacked, you'd imagine here in Catholic Ireland that there would have been an outcry on that.
Indeed.
It was very muted in the media, muted in public discourse. You know, it probably got a few lines in the news, but straight on to Gaza for the rest of the week.
Indeed.
Now, let me just give an example of what Marco's talking about in relation to what we're being fed here. Okay, so Hamas has used propaganda so much in the last number of months and certainly in the last couple of days, but in relation to saying that the people are starvation. There's starvation in Gaza. That it is a horror show. And if we look at just one image, first of all, that has been bandied about, and that's this one here, in relation to this child here, who has been said was starving. Now that's his brother, I think, beside him. the green or blue or whatever it is thing. But that child, of course, it was never told. Never told. I know the New York Times had to, I think it was the New York Times had to withdraw their, had to correct their thing. But this child here suffers from cystic fibrosis, so much so that this child was even treated in Israel for his condition. Nothing about that. Just this picture of this child is dying from starvation. This is what has been going out on the likes of in Ireland and in other mainstream media. And,
they have been willfully and knowingly misrepresenting events, distorting. It's a case of a blood libel against the state of Israel.
Yeah, and let me just contrast this with another picture for a minute now, that you won't see in Ireland. But Hamas has said that you know, everyone is starving. They had Eviatar, is it Eviatar?
Eviatar, Eviatar, yeah.
Okay, so just one image here shows, and you won't see it in Irish media. This is him being handed a can of some kind of can of something by his Hamas kidnappers, and if you notice the arm of the person handing the can over, there is absolutely no starvation evident on that arm. That you could say thing. Whereas the poor hostage, as you can see, is in grave danger. He's emaciated, absolutely, and it's shocking that we're never shown really these pictures and an explanation for it. I'm sharing them with you now because I can't live with myself knowing that these images are out there that people don't see around here, and that clearly is a case of the person with the can there has loads of food, and the person, the hostage there, is in a dire condition, to say the least.
And another point on that, Eugene, is the absolute cynicism of Hamas, that they allowed those pictures to be released. Why? In order to put greater pressure on Israel, Trump, the society at large, the European leaders, to do something, because there's so few of the hostages left now. Will any of them be alive before all this terrible stuff is over? But not only are they not ashamed to show that poor man there, they're doing it on purpose for a reason. They exploit our humanity by having all these images of young people in Gaza on our televisions every night. But they're equally exploiting us by showing this poor hostage. It just goes to show there's no morality at all in that organization.
And as you say, Marco, as you've said on previous webinars, that the Hamas, in the case of the Nazis, Nazis tried to hide their actions and their guilt, whereas Hamas are very open about what they're doing and what they want to do and what they want to achieve.
Very open, and they broadcast it to the world, urbi et orbi, to the city and to the world, as they say. They are broadcasting. It's out there for everyone to see. Everything that happens since the 7th of October, they documented and put on the web.
And then this is another video that this is a part we can talk over this video. There's no we think, but this is another video that you will not see in Ireland, and this is the other hostage. Help me here, Marco. Let's see now.
Another Israeli hostage shown writhing in pain in his Gaza prison. There's barely anything to eat. I can't sleep. I can't live, he sobs. His own mother, who approved the release of these latest horrifying images, say her son's weak voice sounds like he's accepted. He may never come out alive.
Yes, this is obviously the product of depraved minds. This is this qualitatively they've gone worse than the Nazis. But this is, this doesn't come out of the blue. We have context here. People like to talk about context. They abuse the word context. This has been going on for decades. This is how people have been educated, not educated. This is what they've been taught in schools under the PA, okay, the so-called moderate wing.
Sorry, just turn that down a little bit. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Marco. I had the volume on too high there. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So not to worry. This is also another horrible scene we are seeing. They're trying to manipulate, obviously, people. It's going to backfire. It's already backfired. But this is the product of Palestinism. They have been taught. They have been. So the children have been brought up. All their television programs are informed by hatred of the Jews. This is all well documented, and these are the results.
And Ned, as a country who has provided kind of UN peacekeeping, has provided, we're such a generous nation in so many ways that we cannot condemn this absolute horror that we're looking at here on the screen. That we can't condemn this. What is wrong with us?
I'd say it's a subject that will be looked at in years to come. How we managed to find ourselves in a position where in the beginning we were an absolute outlier in European thinking. We have managed now to get some minority groups, minority of countries in Europe to buy into our narrative. We're contemplating bringing in this occupied territories bill, which our own business community are worried about. They have enough to fear from Mr. Trump and his tariffs. There's all those reasons and will eventually have to be discussed in a proper, rational way. But as long as our media and our left-wing elements will hype this up, continue to have Saturday march for this, Saturday march for that. They're gearing up for a big march, I believe it's sometime in September now. We're running into the start of August. It's all hype. I saw a lot of that hype in different issues at different times. I remember distinctly the hype about the black flags of H Block when bunches of thugs were going around condemning and boycotting and intimidating elected representatives around Ireland. And, very few shouted stop because there was fear there too.
Yes, the same mechanisms are in place, and to a great extent, the same actors are perpetrating this, only now using the Palestinist flag. But I think people are beginning to join the dots. I think we see a glimmer of hope.
Okay, we see. Okay, we do. Yeah. Okay. Do you see, Ned? Where do you see us going? How do we need to? How do we need to move on from where we are now? In your opinion,
one thing I did notice. I'm not sure if my reception is interfering with this. I'm very crackly here. One thing I did notice with interest when the focus came on Iran and the threat that Iran were posing to the rest of the world with their nuclear capacity. And the Israeli army made kibosh of them. I think for one split second there was a big rethink going on in the minds of Irish people who began to see things in a bit of perspective. We are worried about countries like Iran having nuclear capacity. And if we can't stand up to them on our own, the very last thing we should be doing is making life hard and making judgment calls on the Israelis who are prepared to and have the skill and the whereabouts to take them on. I mean, Israel is a very small country. It's extraordinary what they have been able to achieve as an economy, in agriculture, in all human sciences. And also, quite clearly, when it comes to military matters, they are extraordinary. So why, in the name of God, are we at this point in time putting ourselves further out on a limb in Ireland against this country? Whatever wrongs they have done, and every country in war will do wrongs. But the greatest casualty and the first casualty in every war has been truth. And there's no doubt in my mind that the truth has been used against Israel from start to finish.
Okay, I think we are nearly there. Does anyone else want to just add anything before we wrap up?
That's fine. I think I've said what I had to say.
Marco?
Yeah.
Okay.
Likewise.
Well, listen, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it
Good
there.
to talk to you both.
Thank you, Ned.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Ned. Former Senator Ned. Thank you indeed for joining us on the Green Zone Conversations with Eugene Doyle, and indeed my co-host Marco, as always, and friend Marco from live from Jerusalem. Thank you indeed, and hopefully Ireland will come on the right side of history on this issue at some point. And as Marco says, and he's not far wrong when he says there is a beginning of the joining of the dots. And even that, when Ned mentions after what happened in Iran, there was a kind of a small sea change here in relation to the thinking. So maybe, and the one thing that we can say about Irish people is Irish people in general are not anti-Semitic. They are not. It is the chattering classes and the severe left, that really carry that mantle of anti-Semitism, and I just hope that I hope that the hostages will be released. I hope that a peaceful situation will be found for the security of Israel, and indeed that ordinary Palestinians who are Palestinian Arab people in that area that are not guilty, that they will have better lives going forward. So thank you all for joining me again, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a million, Ned. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll end it there.